we're
Okay,
doing.
so today we have a very special guest. We have Jenny. You still go by your last name, Fellman?
Sure do. Lost it
Right.
once, we'll never lose it again.
Amen. Okay. And before we went live, we were talking about, well, we'll talk about it, but we have a past, all three of us here. Abigail, nice to see you.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm the host. Like, this is our podcast, but I'm talking.
go for it.
Go for it. And so Jenny was kind enough to come on. She's in Toronto, so we're all in different time zones. For me, it's 8 a.m. in the morning, or 8:25. And still got my coffee. And Jenny, I was talking to Abby before we yesterday, and I think you want to talk about your transition from being a man to a woman.
Don't say transition like that. Like,
your transition from being a born-again Christian into a full-blown atheist.
yeah, I think I probably
You'd
sometimes
like to touch on some of that, yeah?
Yeah, let's chat about it. Sure.
But before we get to that, let's give a bit of the background of how we all met and what. Obviously, to transition, you have to be in something radical to move over. So, who wants to talk about how we all met and where we met and that craziness?
Well, I will say, I was thinking we haven't been in the same room since 1996. The three of us.
No, I know.
Well, the last time I was with Jenny, I was getting high around a fire in Tofino.
Yeah, listening to some Who.
Yeah, I was pretty stoned.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. But as the three of us, it's been 1996.
Wow.
That was the last time I came to Toronto.
No, we were
and saw you guys.
babies.
Yeah. 16, 17 I was. Yeah.
So I moved to Toronto. I think Abigail and I talked about this. I moved from Arkansas to Toronto. Toronto had this, like, the Toronto blessing at the Vineyard Church, where thousands of people would fly from all over the planet. And Jenny that was her home church, right?
Sure was. I was there the night that the river started to flow.
Were you really? Okay,
So what was
that's
that
a story
like?
I haven't heard.
You know, I've tried to analyze this as an adult and outside of the organization. And it's really hard because the science part of my brain that we were taught to ignore wants to still kind of qualify and quantify, like, what was it? Where was it from? But, that time I was just so young. And I don't know what I would have been, 13, 14. What was the slogan, guys?
Seriously?
More in 94. So wasn't it 1994? Because that was the slogan, I think.
More in 94.
Yeah.
Was that John Arnott's slogan?
Or was it Randy Jackson? Is that who brought the
More
Lord?
in 94, doubled in 90.
At least it didn't have the word "come" in it, which we were all really appreciative of, because they love using that word too much.
Not even going to touch that one,
At
Andy.
least it wasn't "come" in 94.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that at that time, my brain does like the dramatic. And, like, despite that, I may not have the talent of a professional artist, I have the heart of an artist. And so I think that, that was when music got interesting. Church wasn't also as boring. And so I think that night it was like, I don't know, all of a sudden, like, Randy's up there and then people start falling over onto the ground. And that was when laughter started happening. And my brain wasn't trying to figure out at all, like, what is this? My brain was like, wow, this is amazing. And it felt like a playground for a kid, but a kid amongst adults, right?
So just randomly, people would just, like, so someone was preaching.
Yeah.
And then some people just start falling and laughing spontaneously.
Yeah, I thought there is a video we could pull up. I am sure that it's online somewhere.
Jamie, pull up that video.
Yeah,
we don't have it, Jamie.
Yeah. And I just remember, I think it was how it all started was like John Arnott and Randy on stage, and then one of them fell over. I remember. And it wasn't like the head, like the whole Pentecostal type of put my big hand, on your forehead. It wasn't that. Like, all of a sudden he fell over, and then, like, I would just say kind of chaos broke out, but like chaos in a Christian sense of, like, the Holy Spirit.
It wouldn't have been John Arnott because I don't think he manifested anything physically the entire time. I don't think he had any...
He manifested a big belly, that's for damn sure.
Yeah, he was always more quiet, wasn't he? Yeah.
Hard to receive.
Yeah. I would have my own versions.
John Arnott being the pastor. Yeah, my memories of John Arnott are kind of creepy. Like, or something unauthentic about him. Because I was in their house a fair bit, and because of marrying Allison, right? Like, she was one of the darlings of the church, and
one of the anointed.
Their little injured, person that, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, and yeah, there was a lack of, I think my gut feeling was there was a lack of genuineness about him for some reason.
But. This is really early for me to go here. And Abby has heard me talk about this in beyond my own discovery about this. But I actually, as I've discovered, I'm neurodivergent and that I have ADHD. And it has been very transformative for me at 45 to realize this about myself. But what I also have my understanding of the Vineyard and TACF is that it was an invitation to a lot of neurodivergent Christians. And so sometimes when we look at those leaders, so John Arnott, Mark Dupont, we look at some of those big leaders to us, right? The prophet. And I see it through a different lens now. So I see it through neurodivergency, being that he may have seemed that way to you, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's also neurodivergent. And so some of what we're picking up about his personality is some of his neurodivergency.
So a bunch of autistic people got together.
I think a blend, a little, I'm sure that there was everybody there, ADHD, OCD, autism. I'm sure if we all were to go back to a reunion and held a sign of that game Headphones where you wear something on your head. Yeah. And I just feel like I see it a little bit different now because of that new, I don't know, lens I might be filtering through.
Yeah, I mean, it was a wild time to be injected in, and then I think I was close to everyone in your, all your brothers. I worked with Brent, worked with Kyle. Kyle's one of my best mates, and Jeff. When I was getting together with Allison, was Jeff and Tabitha. Are they still together?
Yeah,
they did it. They did it. So how did you feel like the Vineyard, that whole move? Obviously you were young when it first started, but looking back, it really infiltrated our families,
everything.
I mean, it was all consuming, right? It was 7 days a week a church. If you wanted to go there, it was 24/7 almost.
And I did.
Everyone worked there.
Yeah, everyone worked there. Yeah.
And so did you get kind of sucked into the vortex? Obviously, were you moved by it? Did it, what was all that?
I feel like half of it, it's I was so young. So I try to practice, because I think for years I was very critical of myself, of the whys, why couldn't you see this? But, coming from the family that I came from, my own story, I feel and I've never wanted to do that. I always want to see the silver lining. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I try to take this. There was some good, wonderful nuggets. Hello, look at this friendship that I have with your sister, right? Where it's how many decades later, and some of my core friendships, most of those people have left the church. So it's that was
my seat just collapsed. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
So there's some wonderful stuff.
There's some silver linings for sure.
There are, but I think that at the end, I look back at it and I want to start with the positive part just because it's I've had to unpack, I think, a lot of trauma from that time period. And I think that, there's so many things, I was one of the kids that was there every night and my whole family got focused on it. We were there every night. So my education was out the window, like an actual formal education, right? So I don't like school, high school. I didn't really apply myself because I was going to be a missionary. I was going to save.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting because your dad's a lawyer and your mom's a professional, is she not? Or was she?
She was. And that's why I always like, it's still something that I might like stick my toe in to kind of talk to my mom about. But yeah, like I was trying to, I said this to her the other day, like I'm the only kid, but you remember I was the youngest out of everybody else, right? And so everybody else was getting, really their formal educations, universities, colleges, but I was still a teenager. And so everyone was focused on the Holy Spirit and what's going on. And it was like, yeah, like I'm the only one that doesn't have a degree out of my family. But that was literally because I thought that I was going to be a missionary.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy how these moves arrest us in development in sorts. Like, because I went through the vineyard, came through that washing machine, and then went to Kamloops and slipped right into another very cultish environment. And there it was like, we're all going to be martyred. It's revival's coming. Like, I can't stand that word anymore, but like, I remember they used to send memos out like, everyone show up to church in Green on Sunday. Revival's coming this Sunday. And then we would go to church in Green.
Okay, so why do you have to wear
green?
Because they heard from God, green's the color.
Oh.
And so we would all do it. And then it was like, and then looking back, it's like, okay, maybe I was wrong. Next Sunday and it's orange. It's like,
yeah, it was all about the color, right? That's why Jesus didn't come, the Holy Spirit.
I think it was all about like, I mean, I don't think there was a master plan. Like, I don't think that the leadership sits around and think, okay, I think it's like power and ego. I don't know. It's like this kind of natural inclination to, we've got to keep people excited that kind of bleeds in. Like, that's the struggle I have with all of this stuff, is the bleed of like God, if you want to believe in a God, and humanity. That's where the chaos comes, and the hurt, and the it's like purity meets the murky water of just human nature.
Well, I think that, kind of one of the reasons why I was like a slow crumbling tower for me of leaving church, but that exact part of that bleed, and then you know that something feels uncomfortable there. And what I find is that for me personally, I started having issues with theology. And then you have someone above saying, this is what it's about, and these are the rules, or this is what I'm hearing from God. And then what I found is that as I grew older, I started having, my own value system. And then if you start unpacking, let's say, one part of what you're getting taught, then it was like, well, I can't just unpack, let's use the big, homosexuality, right? And my stance against that. For me personally, it was about divorce. So it was like, divorce is the devil. It is Satan, and it is a demon. People told me this. It's the devil trying to take you away from your husband. And what I found is that as I had to unpack that part of the Bible, it meant that like a person, I forget there's a proper word here, but there's like debate theory that when you unpack something over here that doesn't make sense, you can't just spotlight that. You have to also go across everything and start unpacking it. And so what I kind of found was, well, then I started building my own theology to make me comfortable being a Christian. And or looking back at TACF, and like that's where it's like life, God, religion, science, like it all starts, that God factor, it really skews everything.
Your cuckoo clock's going.
I'm so sorry, I just turned off my phone.
You froze on my end right when you were saying divorce. So was that like a tipping point, or?
Yeah, like it was divorce.
So that was the theological quandary, that because God didn't agree with divorce.
Yeah.
So you must have hated me when I left Allison.
Well, like I was so young to that. And
Let's
so
deal
when
with that.
I know, right? And so at that point, like in which I like, in later years, as I became a woman of my own mind, I apologized to you for, because like it was atrocious. Like the whole idea of when you needed your friends to be there, because we all make bad decisions and we also learn from our mistakes, and how the church shuns people. And then is like, don't talk to this person over here. Like, I'll never forget the youth pastor at the time standing up in front of the youth group saying we were not allowed to talk to you. And so it's like, I'm really a kid, and you're like, okay, sorry, there's rules. Okay, so I'm not allowed to talk to him. And then there's just like a lot of like weaponizing, right? Something like it's like evil, and there's a lot of like demonic talk, right?
Yeah, a lot of fear. I think what you're pointing to, Jenny, is something that Christians often don't want to ask any questions because there's so much fear that the whole thing will unravel. And if you ask the first question, you have to ask all the subsequent questions. So it's like an unraveling tapestry.
Yeah.
So you pull at one end and then something unravels over here. And I can see how they double down on denial and just not wanting to go there with the questions, those scary questions, because if the whole thing unravels, then your reality collapses.
Yeah, and there was this unhealthy fear from us, the youth, at that specific spot in history, to our leadership, and I think it continues to this day. Where I remember, who was that guy who used to hang out? I can't remember. He played drums, big, tall Polish guy, kid. Greg. So he
married in Florida, right? Yeah.
So he was living with Jen.
Yep.
So I would sneak off and go see Jen, and he would be in the car with me, and we'd drive all the way up to Sudbury, which is like
God. It was
6
Sudbury.
hours.
Wow.
I was still married to Allison, and I'd be like, I'm going on a fishing trip with Greg, and so she was there with Kim, was there with Jen, living with Jen in like Elliott Lake, which is a long fucking way. And then come back, and he would say to me, like, Kim's just told us that we can't talk to you. I don't get it. And I could see the tearing going on. And then when you said that, because I've never heard that was actually said, I knew that it might have been said. It kind of made me feel a little bit like emotion came up in me, because I had to make my heart pretty cold to it all, because it was just unbelievable. Like, all my friends just dropped off a cliff, and I was sleeping in my car. Greg was the only guy, and he's like, when I'm picking friends, it would be the most unassuming kid, like Greg, but he was the one that said, fuck them, I'm staying by you.
Do my own.
And I remember, because I ran varsity fence with your brother, and all the church was working there, and they would all murmur. Paul of France, your ex, they would all, Mark and all of those guys would, and then every time I get close to them, all the conversation would shut down.
Horrible work environment.
Yeah, well, and then John Arnott and Kim came to my work site, and they came in and they said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You can't. You're crazy. You're throwing your life away. God is going to turn his back on you," and all this stuff. And I ordered them off site. Say, "Get off my work site right now."
Where do you feel like you like? Where was it within you that knew how to pull that out and to stand up for yourself in front of them? Like, where did that come from?
I think it was a survival instinct, because I didn't think it through. Like, I knew, because Allison and I were like,
get your wives right.
Like, when it comes to the hierarchy of who, like, we were a known factor in the Vineyard Church, right? Like, Allison had always been there. She was the one doing sign language for all the folks. And I was the guy that was like rescuing this wounded bird. That's the way it felt. And then I had so many people come to me and say, you're the first renewal couple, and this is all prophetic. And the whole time I had this big like deficit inside, like, this doesn't feel perfect. And I was telling Abigail last week, the day before our wedding, I ran away. Like, Allison and I were standing at the lake the night before our wedding, and I just turned and ran, and I didn't want to come back. But anyway, without getting into all the ins and outs of meeting Jen and the chaos of that, I just thought I could have faked it for 40 years, and I realized on our wedding night, there's no way I can do this. I just It was a survival.
Yeah.
Because I remember saying to people like Paul and with different people, I said, I know that you've been told not to hang out with me. You need to listen to your youth pastor. I'll survive. So I have this like survival, like I
Mhm.
will just lone wolf it. I
Yeah.
don't need you guys. I don't. So I suppressed all that pain,
Mm.
and it was a hell of a lot of pain. And I didn't cry about it. I didn't mourn it. I just got really fucking tough because
Mm.
I had to be around all of my employees were at that church. So I
Yeah.
had to be, so I would walk up to them and say, I know you're talking about me, but right now you're on payroll. So you walk and you work and talk. You can talk about what you want, but you don't stop and talk. So you're free to do what you want. So I mean that takes a lot of grit, but also a lot of denial of myself to say this hurt isn't hurting me when it really was. And then it all came crashing down after we finally got a divorce. And I thought, now I'm free to be with Jen. And I was completely empty. And then
Mm.
Jen just said, I'm out. There's nothing there. Like there's no one home. Like I was gone
Mm.
because I think just years of just suppression finally the debt collector came back and said, and so yeah, I think that's how I did it. I didn't pre-think it. I wasn't like, I don't know if it was a good thing. It was just, it's probably the same way a soldier goes to war and sees people being blown up in front of him and doesn't cry until he gets home.
Mm. Right.
That's the way it was for me. I think I just was like, I'm in war. I got to get through this. I'm not going to feel any of it.
Yeah.
And of course, the body keeps a score or whatever. It
Yes.
came back tenfold. Yeah.
I think that that's, a part of the shame factor where it's like religion gets so mixed in with shame as well. And then I think that like you look back at that and it was a time of your life where I don't sometimes know if we knew what we were exposed to, because I really commend you, Jobie, to be able, like, I know that it took its toll on you, but I really think that you showed strength in a time where everyone was against you. And so that strength, sometimes we learn later in life that strength doesn't mean closing off, and it's about how to be strong and still open. And I think that that's probably like we all experience that leaving TACF. But at that time, like it was a crazy environment. And like, I think that that in itself, like, it was also where you were because a lot of people don't experience that. And
No, like like leadership all up in your business.
yeah, it's very controlling, right? Like it is very controlling. Like I remember intercession parties where people would be like praying you back to Allison.
How to have a miserable night, an intercession party. My
Oh.
goodness.
And so it's
You
like,
remember Pat Cocking?
sure do.
Oh man,
Sure diddly do.
she was a piece of work.
Something else, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just I look back on some of that stuff and with embarrassment that I was sucked in. Like I'm embarrassed about it. like I know that it was a strong vortex and there was some beauty there. There was lots of beauty. I mean, the community was insane and we had a blast right back in the bookstore and met so many great people, like you say. But some of the stuff that, like just the way when Pat Cocking would walk into a room, we'd all be like, and I was like, fuck me. I wish I could go back in time and just call her out on stuff, not fear. But we're so afraid. Because I think we've like, if you speak out against this person, you're speaking out against God, and then look out. And I think that's what was fed to us.
Yeah, like don't you remember like when someone like the slap down of the table to end an argument was like, but God told me.
Yeah.
And so when someone's like, but God told me, and that's where it's a slippery slope, right? Because then it's like people are hearing God and that's dictating other people's behavior is what you hear from God. Like at that time, that was normalized to us. So it would be
that
like
vetoes everything. If God's told you something, or the shaming, I remember Pat Cocking would say she would shame people for watching Friends had just come on the scene. And she said, some people record Friends and go home and watch it afterwards because they can't miss an episode. How
there's some people in this room. You know who you are. You know who you are. I'm not going to ask you to stand up.
Yeah.
You've been watching Friends.
Yeah.
I want you to slit your wrist now.
My favorite one is where they would do the porn, where they would so you people, you've fallen into sexual sin. And then all these poor teenage men would shuffle towards the front of the church and we'd all know who they were. You know, you've fallen into sexual sin. It's time to repent and be cleansed. And all you'd have left is women standing and sitting in the chairs, and all the men were at the front. And we're like, gotcha. We know who you
They
are.
knew.
Like, how shame. And then you might have one woman at the front. You're like, what is she into?
Yeah.
How to expose yourself to hundreds of people? You know, the whole sexual sin thing.
Oh, don't get me started. Just how like the purity culture is it's really robbing, you know, generations of healthy sexuality. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there was, and there still is in any organized religion, it's like it builds up purity to such a height that then there becomes so much shame when you want to just say, I watched Friends last night, or I feel like I don't feel like I can marry this woman, or I'm not in love with her. Like, there was no platform to share real, the realities of what were going on inside us, because we were so afraid of being maligned, and then the bars just kept rising. It's like yeah, I mean, we were around professional purists, right? Professional, holy people, and to even say, excuse me, I kind of struggle with a bit of drinking. You know, good luck.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to get kicked out of the church, so you suppress it, and then it finds a way out.
Yeah, I know. You know, I feel like so much of what I've had to unpack, and I still have to unpack, is like the purity culture. Women in general, like, don't get me started. And
get started, Jenny.
The church.
Come on now.
Yeah, well, it's like I remember discovering a podcast when podcasts weren't cool, right? So it's just like people were just grabbing microphones and talking. And I remember that, well, which is essentially what we're doing now. But it was all about, she had different women on, and it wasn't just Christianity, it was any religion. And then they were talking about the woman's experience in church. And I'm like, okay, so let's just level set that. In general, Christianity starts with the story of Adam and Eve. So from the beginning of theology, we are taught what about who I am as a woman, that I am created out of a man. So I am a man's spare rib.
There you go.
So I am not unique or divine in the sense of I am a woman and there is also man and we are separate. I am created out of man. So it's like I'm already subservient because your bone made me, which is weird.
To take care of his loneliness.
But do you, side fact, because I've just broken 14 ribs and been through all of that. Do you know that women have one extra rib than a man?
Well, honestly. So you mean you took my rib? Maybe I had an extra run and man was born.
You took my rib. I didn't realize that until the surgeon told me that women have an extra rib. I'm like,
well,
so which came
weird?
first? That the knowledge of maybe there's a skeleton on the ground, whoever's writing Genesis. Well, that's what she's got.
Right?
Let's
like,
put that in.
Yes, right? Like the whole thing. And the fact that what I have a hard time with theology is the literal fashion of interpretation. Because interpretation in itself is complicated, because if you're not black and white with your interpretation, so being very literal, then it's just left up to our brains to be metaphorical. And God forbid Adam and Eve was a metaphor. Christianity was built on it not being a metaphor, that it is a literal sense.
The gospel truth. Yeah.
Yes. And so then what did we do? Well, we're the ones that talk to the devil. Man was too good to talk to the devil, but women, because we're craftier, like what's there, that we were the ones that talked to the devil and then roped Adam into doing something bad that forever separated him from God. So we are the root of Adam's sin. And what a shame-filled role to be entered into as a woman into the church. Meanwhile, then there's all of these other aspects of women in church you know, I would say that in most cases, women are never in leadership. They are never taught to have a good opinion. If we look back at our time at TACF, I remember 2 female leaders, 2, and everyone else was on the side of the husband, raising the child and maybe having tea with the other women.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just, you know, like what a sad place to be as you're growing up. And I'm like, okay, so I grew up in shame because of the story of Eve. And then it just continues, right? Like that's the beginning of the Bible. And how many bloody pages are in the Bible? And it's story after story after story until, like, I remember back in the day, people would say, oh, but I'm not an Old Testament Christian. I'm a New Testament Christian. I'm not the Old Testament Christian where it's like an aggressive God. I am Jesus-based and formed in love. And I'm like, okay, well, let's go through that New Testament and let's take the theme of women and let's talk about all the things that Paul talked about women. Once again, really bad, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, like then the message we get from there, like I would say from the New Testament, like then there was the women around Jesus. So that's its own subject. But then there's still that part of we have to never adorn ourselves, cover ourselves, because we will what? Goes back to Adam and Eve. We will lead a man to their demise because we're just too tempting.
Delilah.
Jezebel, Delilah.
They called her Eve because she's evil.
You know, like all of it. And that's what we learn as women in the church. It is so sad.
Well, it's the Jezebel spirit, which almost always takes
that
the
got
form.
thrown around so much.
I know. Let's cast it out of you right now. Like,
I mean, I had the Jezebel spirit for sure so many times.
Yeah.
But it's a feminine energy that they would, and it came through the line from, so it was Jezebel, then Herodias, who killed John the Baptist. She had the Jezebel spirit. So it's these women figures in the Bible, but then the belief is that was a spirit that could also enter a man, but it was a feminine spirit that was domination, manipulation, and control were the 3 components of the Jezebel spirit. So that was a feminine entity, I guess, that they cropped up throughout the Bible and then showed itself in our times through domination, manipulation, control, all wrapped up in the word Jezebel. That's my understanding of how it was kind of labeled.
I think I mean, I've got lots of struggles with the whole thing, but I think that the Bible is idolized to a point where, it's not metaphor. It's not, it's the gospel truth, and you can take it any which way you want to slice it. Like you can read one scripture and make it and fold it for whatever the application. It's doable, right? And I feel from my experience that the Bible was the problem, really, because it confused my relationship with God. The Bible, and then coupled with humans' form of religion, creating a church, creating an organization.
The power structure.
Yeah, it just completely fucked up my relationship with a higher being, if there is one. And I mean, my personal belief is that there is one. I just can't deny it, even though through all the hurt that I've been through and everything. But it's taken me and still is taking me years and years and years to separate people's version of it, religion, and then the Bible.
Yeah.
Like I grew up believing that Noah's Ark really totally happened, and all this stuff happened, and now I'm like, but did it really? Like, really? There was a world, and there was an ark with 2 by 2. Every single animal came
around the entire world. Okay,
seriously, and they haven't found it yet. Well,
and
some people will say they have.
Together,
a little scrap of wood. Yeah, and yeah, it's. But what I'm finding is that now I'm starting to. It's been so many years of detox that now I'm actually bringing these parables into my conversation because they're really good.
Just like any other good teacher.
Totally.
You know,
I've managed to, because I'm sharing it with total atheist, non-Christian friends in a conversation about something that's happening politically, for instance, or what we went through with COVID or whatever it was. And these parables would come to my mind, and I would feel free to just talk about them in a totally non-preachy, religious, just like there's this story of the Good Samaritan. And it's actually a really good story, but it took me, I think, 25 years to be able to talk about it without feeling all this dark kind of web of shit that was tangled up in it. Like I told my son one day just about the story of Samson. And my kids have never been to church. And it's just a fun adventure story.
But it's not really. Because once again,
I know what I left out. I left out the Delilah part, but the jawbone killing 1,000 soldiers.
Like that's the point. But look, because as a man, that didn't resonate with you. The part that it was Delilah. As a woman, once again, it's repeated that a woman was the demise of a man.
Right.
Yeah.
That his strength was his hair, and that who wanted to make him weak was
Same
the
as
woman.
David, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that is my struggle. Like, I think it would be a hysterical exercise to say, once again, we're taking parables, taking a message out of it that we are comfortable with. But the story in its complete nature, I'm not sure if there's a lot and good stories.
But we do that with famous writers. Like we take sound bites, right? Like Nietzsche and all of these things. And I think that a good story is a good story.
I think what you're saying, Jobie, is there's these archetypal stories, like fairy tales often follow the same thing. There's The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. And there's some biblical stories that are archetypal in that they go off, they slay the dragon, they go have an adventure. Abram left his home to go out into the world. All of these things resonate often with the human story. And so that's my takeaway, is that some of these stories can still resonate, just like, for me, the Harry Potter story or the Lord of the Rings story can resonate as far as
the hero's journey.
The hero's journey, going out of your comfort zone, slaying the dragon, whatever the dragon is, and they resonate with people. And some of those biblical stories still do resonate, but there's the darker side to them as well. As there is with fairy tales, where it's always the evil stepmother. There's always an evil stepmother. It's like every single story.
Yeah.
He's not having it. He's like, it's all bad. Burn it.
I'm not, it's more like, because then, so Abby's bringing up Abraham. Okay, y'all, God told him to kill his son and to sacrifice his kid. And he has his kid strapped down to a fucking stone and to prove, right? Like, let's
Child services weren't called in then.
Let's remember the whole story, not this one factor. And it was like, can you imagine all of a sudden there's like this old man on top of his son? What's his son saying to him? Like, you know what I mean? And like holds the knife above his heart. And then all of a sudden God's like, don't do it. I was screwing with you.
Yeah. And the son knows.
And Abraham's like, don't worry, son, we got benefits. You can get counseling.
Like, psych. Oh, good one, God. You got us there. You know, like.
Yeah.
All of them, Moses murdered. They all murdered.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, like.
Each one of them was a murderer. And everyone's okay with this.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's just so much weirdness. And I just feel like at the end of the day, I feel like where I am now is I feel like human nature, we always are kind of scared of our threats, like our survival instincts. Where's our threat coming from? And so we try to really apply rules and a theology to where we come from, who are we? Because we want to know everything now. And as I slowly move out of the conditioning that church built around my brain.
Mm-hmm.
I am getting to a place where I have to be comfortable in being uncomfortable. And so in that, I have to sit being uncomfortable with the fact that I won't know where we come from. And I have to really embrace humility, saying it's okay to not know,
Yeah.
because we only know what we know today. And it's a beautiful, like, unfolding adventure where the more we get to, the science aspect to understand and examine everything, and new information comes out, we want to evolve. What I find religion does is it stops the evolution, and we are meant to evolve. The problem with us in our society is that we're not really evolving, and we're evolving so slowly, way slower than our technology, right? And so now it's like, I just want to live out of the place of, I don't know if I'm an atheist, because I know that I want everything to go through a science filter first, but I can't dispute there's this, like the God particle or the God cell, like this thing that connects all of us together. And the fact that, in our genetics and in our DNA coding, you can see that there's so much more in our coding. And I'm okay with being like, well, we don't know for now, but we're going to keep on becoming smarter. And let's just embrace learning, not saying, I don't want to learn anymore. Here's the Bible, and these are our rules. Like,
Just fall in line, follow the leader, and shut up and don't think anymore, because it's all been done. I
we can
totally
teach
agree with
our
you. And I've had this, I remember when I was going through that hard separate divorce in Toronto, people would say, well, what about your salvation? Like, and all I would say was, and I knew this from my heart, and it was very remedial. It was just kind of, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I know there's a God. That I felt this unbelievable love from everyone. Was telling me God turned his back on you, and you turned your back on him. And that was the fear factor that was like pushing me, trying to pull me. They were trying to pull me back with that tactic, And I said, when I get to heaven, if there is a heaven, I'm probably going to get a good spanking. But I think God's going to, I know, I don't think, I know that he still loves me. And I felt it deep in my heart. Like when everyone had rejected me, this God, whatever it was like still like this father-son type of thing. Like, I still love you, bro. Like, I don't love what you're doing. And it was just very, very simplistic like that. And it confused the hell out of people. And they was like, well, how can you simplify it so much? Like, don't. And I was like, that's just it. I don't know. And I still, to this day, I agree with you, Jenny. I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen when we die. And I'm okay with not having all the answers. And it's somewhat freeing.
It is.
To just relax into that.
Hard, but freeing, right? Like, I don't need to control everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't all need to make sense right now.
So for you, because I left the vineyard and never came back, and kind of left all you guys, and we reconnected, 18 years later in Tofino. You got married from a relationship from that church, and then went through a pretty harsh divorce, I think, too, right? I mean, I'm just, and was that just whole journey, just piecing it together? Was that part of, like, is that the kind of crux that started you kind of questioning all of this stuff?
Yeah, because, I think that it was it was a slow progression, because I had, my first husband, we had bought our first house in Cambridge, so out of Toronto, and it was too busy, or too long of a drive to continue to drive to TACF. And so tried looking for a church there. And I feel like this is exactly what pastors fear, is right here, right? Because in order to control their congregation, you need to be on site, because you need to hear the message. You need to be ingrained. Like, you need to be in the herd, right? And so,
tithing.
yeah. And so the fact that Cambridge was out of the church, couldn't really find a church I liked, it wasn't crazy enough for me. Everything was boring after TACF, right?
Mhm.
And so then what it built was like this personal relationship with God. And then ended up, rather than just having doctrine from TACF, oh man, I was like hungry for knowledge. So I started consuming so many different people's books. And I got onto one author at that time that really helped me first move out of a fire and brimstone authoritative God that's like whipping you all the time with shame into like a love-based God. And then so that allowed me to start having some self-love. So I think that having some self-love, and then I started going to therapy because one of my friends was an alcoholic, and at that time, she didn't really know she was an alcoholic. I just knew I was having a hard time navigating the relationship. And so I wanted to go and get some skills, but it was the first time that I had gone to someone outside the church. And then I started building these skills, boundaries, healthy relationships, and I really started to realize the type of marriage I was in. And for me, that it was abusive. And so it took a long journey because my self-esteem was so low in order to know what my worth was, and that I could stand up for myself and leave the church. Because in order to get that, like, I needed to know God, much like you, Jobie. I still felt God loved me, even though I was leaving a marriage and doing something sinful, right? And I had to stand like I was such a baby. I was so young, and I had to find my voice in a way that it was still very shaky. I didn't have confidence. All I knew within me is that God loves me. I'm okay to leave. I can set boundaries. I'm in an unhealthy marriage, Jenny. You are okay to leave. This is okay. You're not doing anything wrong. And I had to stand up to really, like, a lot of people I respected that would, I would say, ambush me, much like you experienced. And I got told all the time that the devil, this is a master plan, wanted to pray over me, wanted to like do deliverance because it was a demon that was causing me to want to divorce my first husband. And I had to work through that and stand up against all of that. And then once you start standing up against that, it's like my eyes just kept on getting open and more open. And so divorce was, I would say, a big catalyst for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see that word, the matrix, comes into play so many times, but once you can't unsee what you. I feel like when you say like they tried to do deliverance over you, and I'm like, what's the driver? Like, what makes people, like, when someone like you comes to them and say, I'm really unhappy in this abusive relationship, they don't say, tell me more. Yeah, maybe we need to, come stay with me. We'll fix that. Yeah, maybe we need to talk about an exit. You deserve better. It's like, we're going to do deliverance over you. I'm like, what makes a person do that? I think it's like, I don't think it's premeditated. I think it's like, we can't let this collapse, because if this collapses, it's going to be a chink in the armor of this whole fabric.
It's about them, not us.
Patch the boat, patch
Divorce
the boat, patch the boat.
Contagious. Once
Yeah,
one woman
God forbid.
Don't catch it. Yeah.
It is.
Wear a mask. Yeah.
Well, it's like once one woman leaves a husband, they're all like, lock up your wives. They're on the move.
It's the new pandemic.
Look, when I told a friend that I was separating from my husband, she said, I'm not going to tell my husband because we all know this is contagious.
Yes.
All this women's
I heard the
stuff.
same thing. Yeah, I heard the same thing.
She just didn't. But do you know what I wonder is what I'm realizing now, as when I interact with people still in religion, is the lack of qualification of the people that you go to when you are in trouble. Yeah. They don't have degree. They are not therapists. They're not psychologists. These are just often people driven by ego, have become leaders, and then they end up doing therapy that they're unqualified for. And someone comes to them with marital issues or abuse or whatever the thing is, or addiction, whatever it is, these people are so horribly unqualified to advise and ignorant that they themselves are in dysfunctional marriages. And I've realized as I distance myself and I listen to people still in it, how mishandled and re-traumatized they are, because they're at the mercy of tragically unqualified people and inexperienced people who've been put in positions. Even if I think of our parents, mum and dad were leaders, but they did therapy all the time and were not in any way remotely trained to do that. And then you put in there the fear factor of the contagion of women's lib or whatever the thing is, like leaving your relationship. It might, like in Jobie's case, he was the one leaving. And the fear of people might think that this is acceptable, and we need to make sure the message is clear. This is not acceptable. So there's so much wrapped up. But I now look at, if someone kind of says, oh, here's a Christian book about marriage, to me, I look at it and it's so rudimentary. They're so 20 years behind what we're now exposed to in the secular world. The level of knowledge and skill that is available to us now. People in the church who only expose themselves to Christian theology and books, it's so far behind. It's still about wives submit to your husbands, and that God will be hugely disapproving if you don't submit. It's so far behind, and people just get
church is so
re-traumatized.
understaffed, right, as a whole. And so I remember when because I had, we all have natural gifting, right? You sometimes gifted as a leader, you're gifted as a musician, you're gifted as an artist, gifted as, you can speak in front of people, like, and not be afraid. Okay, and you walk into a church, especially a charismatic church, and if they see you have, and I remember this, like, that's why if they see you have an ounce of gifting, they will overlook all of the issues that you might have. Oh, I have a drinking problem. Yeah, don't worry about that. We'll fix that.
Because I need this skill.
Yeah, what I need from you is you're the new kid in town, and you have a bit of gifting. Get up on stage. And I remember, way after I'd gone through my second marriage, and I remember one night, it was New Year's Eve, and I had gotten pushed around pretty hard by my partner, and I was in tears, physically kind of abused in a way. And I remember driving downtown, and all I wanted to do was to go to a fully like Catholic church and sit in the back pew. And, I was living downtown and partying hard and in a band, touring band, the whole thing, right? And my gut feeling, because I was so alone at that time, I was like, I just want to go to a church building, sit in the back, and just no one talk to me, and just be in hardline to this source, to this other thing that I've always had a connection with, is from a child. Because I used to go on, like, I remember when I was a kid, I'd go on like 3 or 4 hour walks by myself. Not really, but just feeling some connection with something. And what is that? If you go into a charismatic church, they will come back and talk to you, and there's like this inner need just to connect, and the church just gets in the way of it. It's like, oh, you want to connect with God? Well, we're going to stand in between, and you'll see God through me and all my shit. And then this is just this filtering. That's where all the damage happens. It's like, no, I actually want to see what's behind you. And then no, we have to stand in the middle, and then you see God through us and all of our human shortcomings.
Well, I think that sometimes, like, when I hear that story, Jobie, I think that sometimes it's easier to think of, like, there's something that's just dawning on me now that I didn't share. But I think that, like, I see your desire to have wanted to go and sit at the back of the church. And at the end of the day, I feel like God sometimes is an easier image to go to versus ourselves. Because learning how to sit within ourselves and truly have this communion with that self-parent or that self-friend, that's what I hear when you are sitting in that back pew. It sounds like to me that you really had cut off that inner dialogue when you were going hard and you were in pain, and your way to slow down and all of a sudden connect into yourself was to sit in the back of pew of that church, right? And to all of a sudden rest and have quiet and sit with yourself, because we normally don't do that. And so I hear that and I'm like, of course you're going to feel connection, because you're giving yourself an opportunity to fully just feel connected to yourself in that moment.
Right.
So what I
Yeah,
hear
it
you
might
saying,
end up
Jen,
in.
is often it's easier to connect to something that we consider to be a higher power than to love ourselves,
Yeah.
because that's more uncomfortable, is to be in our own presence.
And who teaches us to do that? Like, if it's not our fault, like I didn't know, like, one of the most transformative therapies that I've ever used in my entire life. Like, there's two that have transformed me as a person, and self-parenting was one, and learning inner dialogue. Because the craziest thing, right? Like, I loved God talking to me. I thought I heard God all day long, and I would journal what God's telling me. And when I was coming closer to my time of leaving the church, reread my journals. And the theme I found in them was, because I would write how I'm feeling, and then I would free flow. So almost like unconscious writing. And I had thought that was God writing to me through my body. So I tried not to analyze it, and I tried to just write it. But what I learned is, after building the skill of self-parenting and understanding the critical parent and the positive parent, and how I operated as a critical parent, and I had to learn what positive parent was, I knew. I called it God. Because I reread my journals and I was like, holy shit, look at how loving and accepting and kind I am. And I'm like, but it was through the filter of God. And then I had to learn that, oh, wait 1 second, I know that skill. I was doing it. I was doing it to myself. It came through the filter of it being from God. But that was so empowering to me, because then I knew, for that type of affirmation and connection, I didn't need God. I needed connection with myself.
Interesting.
So you were giving God credit for something, a skill that you were actually developing in yourself to be your loving, positive parent.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, that's really what God is often used for, isn't it? As we can't be a positive parent in ourselves, but through this figure, we get connection to the positive parent.
Or you can, because some people only get critical parent, right?
With
So
God.
sometimes, and I think that depends on, like who surrounds you, who's teaching you, your own personal journey. But, the shame culture of Christianity or religion is tied to critical parent, right? So, that love movement in Christianity of a loving God is more towards the positive parent.
So you mentioned two things. So one pivotal thing for you was understanding the critical parent versus the positive parent. And what's the other thing that's been really pivotal for you?
Okay, I have a hard time explaining this. So it's like someone could just Google it. But I think that I'm a feeler. Like, I think that both of you are feelers too. You live from a place of heart, and I love that. And at times, to me, it really makes you concentrate on emotions. So what am I feeling? And then we try to resolve the feeling somehow. And it just like mind explosion when my therapist was teaching me the triad of think, feeling, do. And that depending on our natures and what we concentrate on, we're going to take a part of that triad and focus all of our energy. And the fact is that your doing and your actions, you might be like, oh God, I don't want to do that anymore. So we try to think about, how do I change this action? Smoking, let's say. I don't want to smoke anymore. And you concentrate on changing the action and you have no success. But the reason why you don't have success is, like, sometimes you might backtrack to the feeling. So what am I feeling that makes me smoke? And that still won't be fully transformative, because everything comes from the mind. So I have to know. So first build my awareness of, like, what am I thinking? So once we start to figure out our thoughts and what my thoughts are, well, thoughts dictate feelings, feelings dictate actions. And so we want to reverse it, but it doesn't. It flows thoughts to feelings to actions. And that has allowed me to, like, everything I encounter in my life, I all of a sudden have to, and there are times where I go very quiet and my self-talk is very quiet. I am oscillating way too high. I am really into critical parent on myself. And then all of a sudden I have to be like, oh, right, what's in my brain right now? What's my self-dialogue? What am I thinking? And as soon as I can get awareness of a thought that's driving a feeling, I can all of a sudden start to reframe. And it's the biggest skill I've ever learned in my life, is how do I reframe my thoughts? And this beautiful thing of neuroplasticity and how we can change our brain waves and the connections of how our brain interacts. And it is through looking at the awareness of our thoughts. And so it's like, it's a daily practice. I get it wrong, I get it right. I get it wrong, I get it right. And
So give us an example of that.
well, this morning, parenting is hard, right? It's fucking hard.
No, not for me.
Yeah.
Piece of cake.
And so something happened with Rose yesterday, my eldest daughter. And I think it triggered all parts of, like, the Christian journey and all the things we've talked about, and then critical parent. And so my first thought when it happened and when I heard the story is, Jen, you've really fucked this up again. You keep doing this wrong. Like, she's behaving like this because you're doing something wrong. And you're just like, you're trying, but you're still a bad parent. And I'm like, try harder, do better, try harder. And that's what I'm telling myself. And I'm like, shit, that's not going to be great at all, because that's just going to put all of this anxiety onto Rose. And so then I had to, like, right before we got on this podcast, I pulled out my beloved journal and I was just like, let's get these damn thoughts onto paper. I'm having a hard time recognizing them. And then I realized I had to be like, oh gosh, okay, what's the positive side of that? Jenny, you are learning. Take a deep breath. Everything is going to be okay. You're not a bad parent. You're imperfect, and that's okay. You want to do better? Let's just take some breaths, get centered, move on.
So would that be you dialing back from your actions, feelings, and then the thought? The thought
So I
was,
Thought was I'm a bad parent, right?
Yeah.
So the thought was the bad parent. So you acknowledged it rather than living out of that center of belief.
Oh, okay.
I am a
I
bad
see what you
parent.
mean.
You become self-aware. I am having a thought, so you're observing your thought. I'm criticizing myself and thinking I'm a failure, say. Because what we so often do is we act unconsciously. So we have that thought, but we don't acknowledge the thought. Therefore, it goes unchecked and we live out of that thought. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because
So you
it's
drop down to what was the first?
so think, feeling,
Okay.
do. And so, at that point, I'm kind of parenting. So I'm focused on actions and doing, right? So
Right.
sometimes it just depends where I am there, right? And I may not be able to climb out of this on my own. I might need to process with a girlfriend or a friend, or I might need to listen or read something that rejogs my muscle memory, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you say more often than not you you start with the do and then you have to backtrack to the think?
Not me. I'm a big feeler. So I'm like, oh, I'm feeling this way. Fuck, why am I feeling this way? I hate feeling this way. And I concentrate on the feelings and figuring the feelings out. And I needed to go up to thoughts, because if my feelings come from my inner dialogue, then I have to go to the source,
The
my
origin.
brain.
Yeah.
So let's say
Yeah,
you're feeling
just...
anxiety and you're feeling on edge, and then you become conscious, man, I'm feeling really on edge right now. What are my thoughts associated with this feeling of on edge anxiety?
Yeah, like sometimes I just need to step out of my brain and be like, what have you been thinking of? Like what's my one thought right now? And it could be like, you're doing it wrong. I'm doing parenting wrong. Would
Right,
probably
yeah.
be my thought. And then I'm like, that's not a great thought. No wonder I feel like a failure. and I get anxiety because I'm telling myself I'm doing it wrong, which
so
is okay. Sorry, go
and the
for it.
doing part is correcting it.
So no, so the doing part is
I guess
just,
they're all connected. In my head, I was like, okay, this is the top and the destination is the bottom, but actually it's a circle.
it's a circle and it flows constantly. There's constant flow. And so it's just about bringing awareness first. Like it's very, like this has been 15 years of this journey for me. And of course, I've talked about it with girlfriends and my husband, and like, it's hard work. It's really hard to like build the awareness, but it's about like, you want to concentrate on different areas. And it's just going back to the mind and then allowing, like, you can't control it. We want to control our actions. We want to control our feelings. And it's unless we are honest with ourselves and start being like, okay, let's bring our intention inward. What's going on
So
in my brain?
you can't control the behavior. The behavior is just going to happen. As far as if you lack awareness, your behavior will naturally flow from the thought and the feeling.
Yeah.
So dialing it back to what's the original thought that then creates this pit in my stomach that I'm feeling nauseous or anxious or whatever, angry or driven, whatever the thing is, because the action will flow inevitably if you haven't addressed those other things. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, I am. And I think that like in people, we all want to maybe feel different. We want to feel happy. And so concentrating on feelings is never going to have change associated to it, because the feelings are just a result of what our thought life is. And so that's work, right? Is understanding my thought life, where it's like, you know, with Christianity, that was hard to do because there's no shadow work in Christianity. You know, the shadow is the devil. And so getting comfortable with the fact that I have multiple sides to me, the yin and the yang, the you know, the light and the shadow, whatever it is. And then it allows me to be like, oh, right. So my thoughts go all over the place. And in Christianity, we feel shame about our thoughts. And so are you guys back?
Yeah, it'll glitch out a little bit, but just carry on because it will. It'll fix itself.
But meaning that, like, so if in Christianity we're taught that our thoughts are shameful and we are our thoughts, you know, the more Buddhist mentality is we are not our thoughts, and our brain is our brain. And so if we come out of that place of self-acceptance, then we can start acknowledging what thoughts we're having, the good and the bad.
Yeah, Christianity seemed to me to be like, as soon as you got down that road of like self-repair without the God element in the workshop with you, you were just new age, and it's almost like self-worship, right? Like, oh, now you're thinking that you can get yourself better. No. You are always shit, and you will always be shit unless you lean on God. You're nothing but a pile of shit. So as soon as you start to do like self-inquiry, like meditation was like new age, right? Like opening yourself up.
Yeah.
Like that's bad.
It was.
Yoga was new age. Yoga was seriously dangerous.
I know.
So yeah, I like that. I was literally yesterday, I was on the deck in the evening talking to Tara, and I was like, how's your day? She said, yeah, pretty good. It's okay. I was like, I just feel like I failed all day until the 2 minutes that I walked from the project I'm working on to the house was literally in my whole day, the only 2 minutes that I was actually present and the storm inside me calmed down. And I was like, I just felt like I was just failing all the time. And it was just, and I was like, well, what? She's like, well, what is that? And I'm like, I think I'm just afraid. I'm afraid I'm going to lose control. And it's great when you get these little like slivers of how life can be when you're actually just in a place of rest and peace and self-love, and the fact that you really don't control anything. Man, is it like so amazing. I'm like, if only I could live in that. Literally, I don't think I felt that for weeks. And I just was walking across the yard and I was just okay with everything. Just for about a minute. I was like okay with the fact that everything wasn't finished on the farm, and
Mm.
okay with the fact that, you know, work is tough right now. And I was just at peace. But the book ending, all of that was just fucking.
So can you remember, so you had this one moment of peace. Can you
Yeah.
remember the thought you might have been saying to yourself in order to feel that peace?
It was like a synergy of probably all of that. Like it was like I came into an alignment all of
Mm.
a sudden. Like it all seems to come back to the same thing for me, is like, be in this moment.
Mm.
Everything else is shit. Like everything else is just, everything that distracts from that
Mm.
is not very pleasant, in my opinion. You know, going fishing with your children, you know, going fishing with my son and spending the whole time thinking about work. It was complete, you know what I mean? Like all of these things. And it seems like whenever things have felt really, really good, it's when I'm feeling the grass beneath my feet, feeling the breeze on my face, realizing that this just comes and goes.
Yeah.
And for me personally, my biggest struggle is feeling like I need to keep all the balls in the air all the
Yeah.
time. And it's a crazy feeling. And so, yeah, I don't know exactly where my thoughts, it was a good place. It felt good. And it felt like I was just okay with everything,
Mm.
you know?
Which is like, I'm
And
sure that you're probably telling
the other
yourself,
side of, you know, before that, it was just this panic, you know,
Mm.
it kind of raises up in me. It's like, I got to plug that hole, plug that hole, plug that hole, plug that hole. And
Go, 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 go.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder
Yeah.
whether, because for me, in the last year, I've started to recognize more, for example, when I feel resentment in me and I live out of that resentment, I'm now able to acknowledge more. I'm feeling resentful. I acknowledge that that's there. Why is it there? I dial it back to this thing happened where I felt taken advantage of. And I've realized that before I was conscious of that, I could live for long periods of time out of a place of resentment without. To me, everything that you're saying is about consciousness, awakening to awareness,
Mm.
to that's the moment of. So now I use it as a kind of barometer of, and this is what I think Jenny's saying, is those feelings alert you to a moment where you have an opportunity to be conscious and explore, okay, because I've started to say to myself, what if it all works out? That's probably the most powerful phrase that I've used. It's a Mel Robbins phrase that I picked up on Instagram. You know, she said, what do I do when I am faced with anxiety? I say this phrase, what if it all works out? And for me, that's been my anchor point to neutralize all of the emotion, because it brings me into the present where I go, and I think it will all work out, actually. I just don't know how. But everything you're describing to me, Jenny, is about moments of awareness, because what you're saying, Jobie, is almost like you were living out of that without having an awareness that it was driving your day, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
And then you have that moment where you step back and you're observing more. Oh, wow, I've been literally living out my entire day in this state of mind. And that awareness is what often brings the peace and neutralizes. Just that action is hugely powerful, is conscious awareness. I've been living out of a state of anxiety my entire day, and this is the first time I've actually acknowledged it.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of lost a lot of its power. Would you say
It does. Or just, that was really beautiful, Abby.
So
you summarized
would that resonate with you, that it's conscious awareness that brings you to that moment?
Yeah. And it's like, you know, like I get it wrong all the time. And like it's a little bit harder with me with ADHD, right? Because my brain is a thoroughbred. It's a going and it's always racing. And so.
Well, I think we're all in the same club, me and Abby.
Abby, your brother just diagnosed you.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. But
high
yeah, and and so it's sometimes a little bit harder for me to slow down, to get present and to breathe.
Totally.
And so it's like that's why I get it wrong all the time. constantly.
Tara said to me, have you ever like thought that if in that moment when you're feeling chaos, you just sit down and meditate? I'm like, oh yeah. But the thought of doing that is so beyond my capability. I know that's what I should do.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I got to keep plugging the holes. Got to keep plugging the holes. And I know there's this little voice saying you should just be still. Like I had this, Abigail sees this psychic lady, and she said to me, every time you feel that chaos rising, you stop and just for a minute, just feel the breeze on your face, just be present. And I tried it for the first day, and for sure, it all vanished. The chaos just vanished. And yeah, it's like an alcoholic struggling with booze when it's right there it's like, and now, I did it for about a day, and now it feels like the end of the world to just stop. I mean, the whole reason I've got a broken back right now is because I didn't take the time, the 2 minutes it took to go and get the little piece of wood to put onto my ladder to make the ladder straight, because it's just this driving, anyway, that's a whole nother story.
Go.
So
till roof blows off, right?
I think Abigail's got about 10 minutes left, but so you would consider yourself now a what?
A human being.
Jenny?
I'm a human being.
Right.
And, and when I say that, I think of evolution. So I feel like there's enough science now behind all of the different versions of early man that we've found bones from. And so I feel like I believe in evolution and what that looks like, but I am not an atheist. I just feel like I don't think that something magically pressed a button and we all appeared. Okay. But I don't know. I believe that we're all connected and we all impact one another. We are all birthed out of the same thing, and that creation evolved, right? So that's where I'm open. I'm just I don't subscribe to religion. I don't believe in one theory over the other. I basically I'm hungry for knowledge and I'm hungry for science. So it's I want fact.
So proof.
And I just think that when the Bible was created, it was before we had a lot of access to science and scientific developments and testing and theories and one of the things I love about science is that scientists they get a thesis and a hypothesis, they prove it, and then they sit there and say, this is what we know now. Come, other scientists, and disprove me so we can be better. And that doesn't happen in religion. And I would love if it did. So I would love if it says, this is what we know, but let's combine our knowledge for collective intelligence versus just saying what we thought we knew 5,000 years ago is no longer relevant. And that's okay. Talking about positive parent, it's okay that we crafted this structure so we would feel safe. But now, we're safe. We're no longer roaming fields and meat. And you know what I mean? We have structure around us for the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, some of us, right? And then I want it to grow. I don't want knowledge to be stagnant.
But this sounds like there's still... Carry on, Abby.
Well, that really resonates with me when I revisit people who are still Christian and I realize that very little has changed. And it's always shocking to me, the lack of progress there. But then they're clinging to ancient texts where if an earthquake happened, for all they knew, that was God's wrath, that they hadn't made an offering at harvest or whatever. That the lack of knowledge back in those days when we were so unevolved, they almost needed these gods to explain why anything would happen at all, because there was no explanation as to why things would happen.
Exactly.
And so I can see how that was necessary at that point in human evolution to try and make sense of what was going on in their world. But now we have that knowledge, but fundamentalist Christians still have a very ancient, rudimentary idea of how things work. And it's always a bit of a shock when I dip back into it.
I mean, I don't think that a fundamentalist Christian or believer would ever admit it, because we believed when we were in the church that everyone else was wrong and we were right and they're all idiots. And that's what would make us go preach on the streets, right? Like we were like, yeah, no matter what you say, we've got it right.
Yeah.
But I believe there's something that they're not willing to acknowledge deep in the human condition that wants to cling to something else, to a raft, other than fixing what's deeper in yourself. It's much easier to cling to this raft of religion or this raft of the Bible or this raft of God than try and figure out why are we even in this open ocean without a raft in the first place. Do you know what I mean? And I think that it's not a cop-out, but I feel like it's like it's like I don't have to think about it anymore because all the answers are there, and it kind of like, it's almost like an easy way out in a way. I believe everything that book says, and the thinking stops now. It's like the believing, I don't have to believe, the fear of believing that like what actually happens when we die is kind of a scary, vulnerable place to be, but also a place of surrender. There is some kind of, like we already talked about, this place of just surrender, and I don't know what's going to happen. But when you believe in the Bible and God, you almost have, it's flicked a switch inside you where it's like, yeah, that part's locked away for me. I know what's going to happen after we did. That unsurety that you guys feel, ooh, that must be horrible because that's all locked away. I don't even have to think about it. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think for me, I don't believe in the institution of church. I can't go there except for weddings and funerals, and even that is hard inside to a church building. I don't believe that the Bible is the gospel truth. I just have tons and tons of question marks, but I still cannot not believe in the mysticism of our world. Like, so the science is very concrete, right? But there's this mystical side, this magic that happens in life that I'm still intrigued by, that is unexplainable by science.
And so to me, I'm like, okay, so which one? Because I really do think that science also proves some of that connection, right? So I just feel like there's things that we just don't understand, right? Like where it's kind of like how the mycelium and the tree roots and the fungi kingdom and the mycelium and that network that's there, right? That's underneath the surface that we never knew. And so I think that there's things there that we don't know that science will eventually show us about how we're all connected. And how, just like the fungi kingdom, we have a root system that touches everything and we participate in it. But it may not be some dude with a big white beard in the sky.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that guy with with the white beard, I mean, for me, I've been, like Abigail knows, I've been physically healed, miraculously healed. And that happened at Toronto. And I've never forgotten
Healed
that.
of what? I'm like, this is a podcast
Something
for another time.
controversial.
Something that you cannot ever recover from. And it's miraculously healed from it.
Oh, well, I'm sure you're going to get comments being like, Jobie, let's explore that on the next podcast.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I was watching with my younger kids, we watched Avatar, the first one, for the first time. And it's such a beautiful
One of my
depiction.
faves, man. One of my faves.
Yeah. Just this like connection with like the earth and all of the, I mean, it is beautiful, right? I mean, my kids are just like, yeah, well, it sounds like we just have a whole bunch of unanswered questions, and that's okay.
Let's sit and be comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That was so fun to connect with you though, Jenny.
You too, guys.
Yeah. We should do this
Mwah.
again. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's good.
We'll all try to get in the same city at the same time.
It's actually more headaches doing it in person, believe you me.
No, just meaning. We don't need to film it. I just like to share a meal together.
Totally. Have you come to Tofino? Are you going to come to Tofino again?
I'm coming in the end of July. Yeah, but we're doing a girls' trip. So it's like me, Ange, Lily, her daughter, and Rose.
Yeah.
And then I'm in Victoria again in September.
Cool.
Yeah. So if you're around, come say hi to us. We're there for 5 nights or whatever.
Yeah, it's about 3 hours from here, so it's not down the road. But we go there every September. I think September.
Yeah, that's when the waves start coming in, right?
Yeah.
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 Sweet.
Cool.
Well, I better tap out, guys. I've got to pick the kiddies up. Lovely to see you both.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Jenny.
it's
It was
been
really
fantastic.
fun. Connect. Go.
All right. Jobie, be nice to yourself.
Yes. All right. Love
Okay,
you,
man.
Jenny.
Love
Thank you.
Mwah.
Bye.